Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's Andrew Turner, founder and host of the G&T Sessions podcast. And today we have an amazing guest, Mr. Sam Cook. Hello, Sam. How are you?
Hey, Andrew. Great to be here.
Looks like you're in a very, very sparkly room, actually, there, wherever you are.
It's just my apartment in Kiev in Ukraine, and I'm trying to keep it light.
It looks like it's like disco balls and dry ice coming out later or something. Is that right?
Oh, I wish, but a little bit more tame. But yeah, no, it's good place to be.
So how come you're in Kiev then? Kiev's quite an interesting place. I've never been there myself, but obviously I have flown, obviously, as you know, in the G&T Sessions helicopter today to Kiev, just to be close by to, when my cosmic, for people that are watching on YouTube, you can see my little multicolored backdrop. Which obviously may be fictitious, to be close to you in Kiev.
Well, I appreciate the personal touch on it. Why Kiev? It's not necessarily the most well-known spot in the world to hang out, but I do think it's probably the best kept secret. And I was a Russian and Ukrainian history teacher when I was in the Army about 10 years ago now, teaching at West Point, the military academy. So I knew a fair bit about this part of the world from teaching about it. I'd never actually been this far east. The farthest I'd been east was Berlin or Prague. And when I left the Army, I decided to travel the world. And I ended up spending a lot of time in Asia and Australia and Philippines and Thailand. But I ended up spending a summer in Europe and really enjoying Eastern Europe, first in Hungary and then Poland. And I really liked Poland. And at the time, I was actually watching in 2014 what was going on in Ukraine as a historian and army officer and current events observer, which was the Maidan, Euromaidan revolution, where the government was overthrown basically by popular revolt. And then the immediate start of right after that of the seizure of Crimea by Russia, and then the outbreak and fighting in eastern Ukraine. So I didn't travel to Ukraine during that period, but I was watching it very closely, decided to settle in Poland, did a lot of research that I was running an agency at the time, media agency, a marketing agency, and I decided I wanted to get some designers and web developers in Poland. Is one of the best locations in the world for that, and decided to settle there. And about 2.5 years ago, I realized that a lot of my best team members were from Ukraine, living in Poland, and one of them moved back to here and just moved back to Kiev, decided to check it out in more detail and realized it was a better place to set up. And really, it's about world-class tech talent, education, and cost of living, and a little bit of money here goes a lot farther than it would in London or, let's say, New York or San Francisco. And trying to bootstrap what has been for a long time a tech startup internally, and now even taking on investor money, I just find that you can make money go a lot farther here, and that's why I'm in Ukraine.
Wow. So you're basically admitting that you're not Russian or Ukrainian?
I'm certainly not. My father is English, actually, from
you see
your little island, little England.
I know you mean my little island.
Yeah, sorry, part of the island of Britain, the southern part of not as Great Britain as it used to be. I was born in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and in '78, my dad was married to an American woman, and they had 5 children. I was the third, and we moved to the U.S. when I was 9. So I lost the Belfast accent and picked up an American one, and at the age of 18 joined the Army. So I was able to...
You joined 18? Oh, wow.
Yeah, well, I went to the military academy at West Point at 18, which officially gave me my ID card, and I started studying, at the military academy, and it became 4 years of very intense, nonstop study, drill, training, work, sports. They knew how to fill your day. And then 22, I graduated and became an officer. But yeah, the Army's been paying me since I was 18, even when I was studying for 4 years. So,
so you kind of do. So what you do when you go to West Point, is that like going to university effectively?
Oh no, it's like going to boot camp with classes. So you wake up at 6:20. You wake up at 5 in the morning and get ready and shine your shoes and put your uniform on and go to breakfast. I think 6:25, we were standing out there at attention for Reveille and then marching into breakfast. It was just kind of nonstop. Everything was scheduled and ordered and very structured. And the education was fantastic. I will say that I couldn't have asked for a better, I think, liberal arts, well-rounded education that the military academy gave, and obviously the other education around military training and discipline and sports and all the different things that come with that were also quite interesting, I would say.
But the West Point, I mean, it's a very prestigious place to be at and to experience. I mean, does it teach you? They teach you strategy and leadership and obviously, specific subjects as well. Is that right, or is it certain types of?
Yeah, the military academy is designed to train the officer corps of the U.S. Army, and not all officers. In fact, only 20% of them do go to West Point. A lot of them come from regular universities in the United States, and some of the best officers I knew were not West Point graduates. There was a very diverse and talented officer corps from all over the country, and that was good. But West Point was where you went if you knew you wanted to be an Army officer and wanted to get, let's call it a very intense experience in your university years. And there was a lot of history classes, and Dr. Henry Kissinger and all kinds of other people would fly in and speak.
Like really interesting speakers and sort of people that would give you some education and guidance.
Yeah, I mean, Jim Collins was there when I was a teacher, flew in and would guest lecture.
Good to Great.
Yeah, Good to Great. And he was the chair of some leadership department and a guest professor, obviously not a full-time all the time. But there were just a lot of people in the national leadership command. Presidents would come speak at graduations. Vice presidents would come speak at graduations. I mean, you're always seeing someone of a high level come there, and there was just, they wanted you to think strategically and globally from the beginning, but also you had to shine your shoes and do the little things to pass muster or mark or whatever you had to do. So there was a grading system for your military, your academics, your sports, and everything was measured.
You had to use toothbrushes to shine your shoes. Do you still do that?
No, we would use cloths, or let's call it special shoe shine rags. Toothbrush might be used to clean, but not to shine it. So, but yeah, I mean, we learned all the tricks on how to make things look good, and it was an interesting experience. Let's call it a one of a kind formative experience in your life at that age. I think a lot of people's personalities, I think 18 to 22 is a very obviously impressionable time. And for better or for worse, I chose that institution during that period. And it certainly is I wouldn't trade it. It was definitely a good experience.
So, normally we guess about what gets you up in the morning. Obviously, you've just given us your kind of historical kind of morning routine. Do you still apply that today? Do you still get up at 5 and?
Well, what gets me up
for breakfast at 6:25, or is it kind of drilled into you, or is it a bit more relaxed than that?
Well, what actually gets me up in the morning now is I try to not use an alarm. I try to wake up naturally, and I've recently started meditation practice, which for someone who's been as busy as me in my career, that's never been something I've managed to stick to, but I'm happy to report I'm doing it now for a couple of weeks, and I do see why it's so beneficial. It's a great investment in yourself. I like to go for a run after I do that, and have my coffee. I guess those are my three big things to do in the morning. Is I find running has always been a good active meditation for me. It gives me the space to think and to clear my head, and it really does, I think, put you in a better mood, especially when you're working through a lot of tough problems as an entrepreneur. I always find a run helps me think through or work through or elevate my my thinking and clarity. But meditation's a different form of that, and I think they're both very valuable. So I would say those are my two really big things, and coffee would be my third.
Well, they say you're not supposed to drink coffee for the first hour and a half after waking up. I don't know if you do that practice, so you straight into the caffeine.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't heard that. I know you're supposed to drink a nice bottle of water or a glass of water when you wake up to rehydrate, but
yeah. No, I hadn't
heard the prohibition on coffee.
No, I heard that basically so two hacks that I heard was not supposed to drink coffee until an hour and a half after you've woken up. Obviously, you've got to look at direct sunlight. You've got to drink some water to rehydrate. But then also, the guidance is not to drink coffee after 2:00 in the afternoon either. I know some.
Yes.
Some break those rules on a daily basis.
I mean, I've done some periods without coffee, and it is interesting. Your body adjusts, and I think we have our own internal energy stores that caffeine can augment or replace sometimes, but you don't necessarily need it if you have good nutrition. So for sure.
Well, I've got to celebrate today actually, because it's actually taken me quite a long time to get you on this show, this podcast, and it's an honor to have you on, because actually you are the first military officer that we've had on the show since we started a couple of years ago. So all I can do is say thank you for coming on today. It's an honor to spend some time with you. Although I know we spent some time together before, quite a lot.
well, the war stories are like fine wine. They simply get better with age. So there's always a more danger and adventure than as it gets older. The stories always get better. So I like to joke about that when I get together with old colleagues served in Iraq with. It's interesting. They certainly look back and reminisce fondly, and more fondly as the years go on. So.
Yeah, I think it would be useful to you to share one of the stories. I think I was absolutely blown away with the stuff when you shared with me before, because I just didn't realize. And hopefully you're happy to talk about this. Is obviously you went through West Point, and then you actually done a couple of tours of duty, obviously in not exactly the friendliest place in the world, or some places which are pretty dangerous. And then you actually I think you did some groundbreaking stuff there to talk to the people that are in that country about, what's the best way of interacting with them, communicating with them, and getting in a better place. I don't know if you can share that story, or as I know it's been put out there in the public world. Is that something you can cover?
Yeah, well, I was very privileged to be let's call it a protege of General McMaster, who was my first commander as a lieutenant. He was a lieutenant colonel at the time. I was a lieutenant, and he went on to command the 3rd Cavalry Regiment and took command of that in 2004 and 5. We deployed, and I was on his staff when he deployed. So not because I was particularly organized or a great administrator, but because he knew I was loyal and could, let's say, hang with his extreme, let's call it perfectionism. I was his adjutant in Iraq, and the adjutant's job it's like Clausewitz during the Napoleonic Wars was an adjutant. He was watching all these great commanders fighting Napoleon, and from that vantage point, he was able to write a comprehensive book on war, which is still read by most military officers as definitive account of the nature of war and how to think about it. So I got to watch General McMaster, a great commander, do what was unthinkable at the time, which was conduct the first successful counterinsurgency counterinsurgency pacification campaign in Iraq in 2005 and 6. Mm-hmm. And he was a Gulf War hero. He won a Silver Star at the Battle of 73 Easting for all the fighting that they did there. And it was very aggressive and well-accomplished commander and knew what he was doing. He knew how to fight. But one of the things that struck me was watching him negotiate. And I sat in tons of meetings watching him negotiate with the tribal leaders in Iraq in the Battle of Talafar. And so watching that, the first tour impacted me quite a bit, because one of the things I realized was you could be the toughest, most heroic commander in the world, but you can still talk to the enemy or people who are, let's call it frenemies or not so friendly, but maybe not necessarily your enemies. And it struck me that war was simply an argument that had turned violent. And if you start with that premise that it's a disagreement between ideas, and you think to any area in your own life where things may have almost gotten violent or didn't, or you walked it back, there's always an opportunity for that. So as much fighting went on in the Battle of Talafar, it could have been a lot worse. Could have been a lot more lives lost on both sides if it weren't for a very aggressive commander who liked to fight, who was good at fighting, resisting the urge to make that his only tool in the toolkit. So I got to see that on my second tour. I went back as a troop commander, and in 2007 and 8, the war had escalated to the point where the American Army had surged a bunch of extra troops in there under President Bush and General Petraeus and Secretary Gates. And there was this kind of crucible moment where, we felt the momentum shifting, and someone, as soon as I got there as a commander, reached out to me and said, hey, the Islamic State, which back then was kind of like a new startup, if you want to talk business terms. They were the younger, more aggressive and new organization compared to Al-Qaeda, which had been the older one. And they said, these guys want to talk to you. And they wanted to talk because we'd come in and been aggressive and staked out our territory as we should have done, and were prepared to fight. And they knew that we were well trained. But I accepted the opportunity to talk. And what ended up happening was I spent a lot of my time as a commander while my soldiers were out doing patrols and raids and sniper missions and stuff like that. I spent a lot of my time speaking to local police and politicians and army officers and also people that were fighting us or had been fighting us and said they'd stopped. And it turned out that we were able to negotiate one of the first mass surrenders in a local area of operations. 180 people, 78 people turned themselves in, and we set up a parole program and biometric database entry of these people, and promises on their part guaranteed by someone on their family or in their tribe to make sure that they adhere to their pledge. And it definitely, that in combination with paying people, some of the people that had turned themselves in and their friends to stand guard on the same roads that they used to plant bombs in.
Right. And,
it really allowed us to isolate the true hardcore let's call it, redeemables who were fighting us and more importantly, fighting the local government that was trying to stand up with the support of the Americans to separate the really extreme from maybe the more reasonable. And I am proud to say that we didn't lose any soldiers in my unit during the tour, and not because anyone who did lose soldiers, many of my friends did, had obviously, it's just kind of random luck, but you also can shape the amount of fighting you have to get into by de-escalating things. So we were able to bring all the soldiers home, but more importantly, not have a lot of fighting in the area with the people that we were supposed to or could have been fighting. And the local population also was spared a lot of that crossfire too. So we were able to, I think, innovate and create an interesting scenario in Iraq. And one of the things that we did was we did some marketing and outreach, and even letter writing to the local population, which helped create a good connection. So the combination of talking a lot and a little bit of writing some letters to the local population, and
was that handwritten letters and stuff? You know, or was it actually?
No, I didn't write Arabic, so I dictated a letter and typed a letter. But then my translator, who'd studied English, Shakespearean English in Baghdad University, translated it. Probably made it sound a lot better than I'd written it in English. And it ended up being distributed by the police chief, and copies were made, and it kind of went viral in a pre-Facebook, pre-social media. It did. It was the sheikhs and the imams were reading it to their people, and the imams would read it over Friday prayers. And
right.
So it was just interesting. What it taught me was the power of strategic thinking about what were our objectives. Our objectives were to hand off control to the Iraqi government, and what are the best ways to accomplish that? It's not always to fight. In fact, it's kind of like a game of whack-a-mole. You kill someone, and then their brother and cousins and other people could become antagonists. So it's
very delicate.
Very delicate. Yeah, very delicate, very asymmetrical, and complicated and high stakes and dangerous all at the same time. So it was a interesting experience at the age of 28, 29 years old.
I was going to say it's pretty ballsy. I think it's pretty ballsy what you did. I mean, all credit to you.
Yeah, I mean, look, you have to take some calculated risks, and one of my calculated risks was reading the environment, the fact that we were doing it from a relative position of strength, and I just needed to say, hey, this is worth doing. And it's funny, the first meeting I did with one of these guys, we finished the meeting. It was in a neutral location, and he ended up clearing the room, and we sat down and had a conversation privately, which ended up leading to some very good intelligence that was very fruitful. And this guy actually ended up leading the reconciliation effort and spoke out to the people. So it was a good move, but I also got a cable 2 days later from the CIA saying, hey, don't go to that meeting. You're going to get assassinated. And I thanked them for their timely communication.
2 days after you.
Yeah, 2 days after the meeting, I got the advice not to go to the meeting. So it was too late at that point.
That's a bit like. That's a bit like if you get the memo. It's like, well, too late. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a little bit. It was kind of funny, kind of not, but it had happened. But it was a bit of a calculated risk, but it paid off. So you have to place your bets.
Wow. So what you're saying is that, I mean, obviously you covered a lot of ground there, but you're saying that you learned when you were the adjutant, you were basically learning and observing from the general, and then you kind of then applied that when you went as the troop leader. When you were actually the captain of that troop. Is that what you reflected on what you observed in the first tour and then applied it in the second tour, or tried to embrace what you'd learned in the first tour? Is that right? Or?
Yeah, I mean, one of the principles in, I think, business and life is the fastest way to get good at something is to have a mentor. And I was just very lucky to watch someone do at a very high level what I did the next tour at a lower level. I was a captain in the second tour, not a colonel. So I was in charge of 140, not 5,000. But watching someone do it for 5,000 soldiers and commanding 34 different commanders who each were captains, it seemed quite, it seemed quite reasonable or manageable doing what I had to do in the second tour compared to what I watched my boss do. So I've always tried since that experience, and I think even before, but I've always tried since that experience, especially in business and investing and tech or whatever, to to find mentors, because ultimately, people who've walked that path before can help you avoid the landmines and speed through some things that, they may have spent a lot of time and money learning, and you don't necessarily need to learn the hard way from everything. You're going to have your own hard ways that you create based on your personality and your unique situation, but you don't have to. You can short circuit or shortcut a lot of that.
And one of the things I found interesting with you, I mean, thanks for sharing that. It's fantastic. I mean, would you find before we move on, actually, that story got covered in quite a famous media. Was it the Washington Post?
Washington Post. Yeah, it was the Washington Post. Tom Ricks, who wrote a best-selling book called Fiasco, which was the first book about the American adventure in Iraq, which wasn't going well, ended up writing a second book called The Gamble, which was about the surge, and it was a kind of part two to a series on Iraq, and it was a best-selling book. And the Washington Post, who he was an executive editor for, ended up doing a book launch, to support his book, and he picked the story that we had as one of his favorites to feature in that launch, as well as a little video they did on the incident or the.
Well, no, we should put that in when we publish this episode, because I think, I know you told me about it and then actually watched it. I thought, I'm sure he's telling Porky Pie here, and actually it was true. So, all credit to you on that one. So, I mean, it sounds like, with that experience, it's very, there's a phrase that people talk about, is this thing called pivot, right? And people usually apply it to the startups and product launch and stuff like that. But what I see with you, and I observe with you, is it's a bit like you've done a human pivot, a personal pivot. Because it'd be great for you to explain what you work on now, because I think people then will realize how you've pivoted from, what could it be? You could still be in the military today. Let's face it. You could still be teaching at West Point. You could be very senior in the US military. And I know obviously you're still very, very well connected to that organization. But so could you explain what you're working on now and how people will realize what a big pivot you've done?
Well, Jim Collins talks about this in a podcast I was listening to with Tim Ferriss, is some people spend their entire life kind of on one track, getting really good at something and just going deep, and my 30s were spent learning how to lead and, let's say, fight, extreme leadership training, let's call it. And from the age of 18 until I left Iraq in 2008, at the age of 30, that was my life. When I left Iraq, I came back and started a very different chapter in my life, still in the Army, which was teaching history at West Point. So I went to study, and I'd studied history as an undergraduate, so it wasn't foreign to me, but I went to study and get my master's degree and then teach history. And at that time, right at the age of 30 years old, I started a business. And I started a business while I was at New York University, because I was so bored, because I'd just been in Iraq working 7 days.
You were at NYU?
Yeah, I was at New York University, NYU, in the middle of Manhattan. And I was just bored, and I had some money because I was getting paid well by the Army, and I had time because I was only studying and nothing else. It seemed like I had too much time on my hands. So I started a tourism company, a walking tour company, and we did some shopping tours and pub crawls and nightclub tours. And I was studying and running a business, which made me almost as busy as I was in Iraq, which, probably at the time was my way of avoiding reflecting on everything and just kind of staying busy, being busy, because of probably some things I didn't want to think about. But I fell in love with entrepreneurship. And at that point, I realized that I was a good commander. I was a really good commander in Iraq, but I was not a good staff officer. I was not. When General McMaster had me as his adjutant, he would joke with me and actually get quite frustrated and say, how the heck did I pick the most unorganized person aside from myself to be in charge of my schedule? And I just would calmly respond, poor judgment, sir. And he would because he was about as disorganized as me or more so, but he was a great leader. And what I realized was leadership and management are two very different skills. And entrepreneurship is a lot about leadership. And there is obviously management you need to do as an entrepreneur, but corporate world, you have to be a great manager typically, and leadership obviously is great too. But there's a premium in the startup and entrepreneurship world on leadership over management versus management in the corporate world. And I just saw my path ahead in the Army as being a lot of staff work and management, which was not my passion. And so I got out. I went back to teach history at West Point. I was continuing to run my tour company. I got really into the website side of it, and I decided that the website technology part of it was really interesting to me. So I started a media agency, a web marketing agency, which became James Cook Media after my little brother passed away in 2013. And I was a website marketing person who focused on, I got really into videos. And a lot of people say, well, how did you go from the Army to media? But I was always fascinated by the power of story and storytelling as a historian, the power of narratives to shape destinies of nations. Churchill was one of my favorites growing up. My father drilled some Churchill into me, and then studying Russian history, I noticed the huge pull of narrative and storytelling in Russian history. And it just struck me as a common theme. And so I decided in my marketing, I was going to focus on documentary style storytelling, which is what I knew as a historian as very appealing to me and personally powerful and authentic way of helping business owners tell their story. So my niche starting in 2013 became storytelling. I taught myself documentary marketing. I used it to do a product launch for Bobby McGee, the running coach. We did $250,000 in 6 months in his product launch. And then Total Immersion Swimming with Terry Laughlin, the late founder of Total Immersion Swimming. We launched his online brand, and they did over 7 figures with that. And then we ended up with TriDot, which is now a multi-million-dollar IT triathlon tech company, and endurance films. And so I realized after a while, I said, wow, I'm really good at making other people money. And it was all kind of in the triathlon industry. I started my own triathlon publishing company, as it were, it was called Triathlon Research. And that's when I moved to Poland. And I was moving really fast on that.
Like you do.
Yeah. I was moving really fast on that. I hired a bunch of designers and developers.
You should have moved to Hawaii if you're going to do triathlons, because that's where you're supposed to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I realized the cost of owning your own product versus helping other people market their product. When you own your own product, create your own product, that's where the huge innovation and risk is. And I wasn't successful on that triathlon publishing company. I spent too much too soon on developers and designers, but in the wreckage of that kind of business in 2015, coming out of that kind of publishing startup that didn't work, I had this code base, and that code base was what became my tech startup. 5 years later, we just kept working on the code while I started a new media agency. And, going all the way back to my tour company, my first website I didn't work at all. I spent like $3,000 on AdWords and got no sales out of it. And so I got frustrated, rebuilt it a couple times, got really into UX and design and process, and just kept fiddling with my own tech. So it's been about 10 years now of trying to solve small business owner coaches' problems, solo operators, solopreneurs, coaches, their problems. And I realized that was just really the problem I was passionate about solving. And we were developing the technology for 6 years now, starting in 2015, and now it's 2021. And about a year and a half ago in 2019, I realized we're not going to do this without some outside capital. The moment was now, because what I'd seen was, we've been going slow for a long time, making progress, but velocity and opportunity in the tech world was important. And I saw that we just had a product that was meeting the moment, which is people are frustrated with all the technology they have to figure out and stitch together and pay for and integrate with Zapier just to run a business online. And it struck me as crazy. Really just insanity.
It's insanity, yeah. I know you're going to segue. That's quite a good segue. But did you have a? I know you said you've been meditating on recently, but did you have a premonition? Did you have like a kind of like a light bulb moment, you think, in 2019?
Oh yeah, no, actually I had it in 2018. I had it in 2018. I was at a retreat with for a couple of years I'd been running the Story Matters workshop and the Story Guild, where I had a bunch of business owners from all over Europe. About 2016, 2017, I launched my own brand online for storytelling. And I'd gotten so good at video marketing that I realized that, okay, people want to pay me to teach them this. I created my own storytelling training. And I realized that it was very powerful method that people were just fascinated with, this idea of storytelling. And I was at a retreat with one of my clients, Benoit, who's on our board of directors now for James Cook Media. And the other people at the retreat all knew me. They were now at this retreat with Benoit doing, all kinds of deep inner work. And they were just saying, hey, you've got so much more potential. Like, you should really, and I was getting this feedback from one of my managers, and it's like, okay, all right, I really need to go for it on this software. So I decided at that point to, really up the investment.
Come out from behind the curtain.
Yeah, up the investment and I had this, I've always had this idea, and one of the reasons why I think I got out of the Army in 2013, 13 years into what could have been a 20-year retirement plan, was, when I got back from Iraq, my second tour, I realized that, and I knew this very personally, it wasn't intellectual, it was very personal, just with the people I saw who didn't make it back, who were colleagues of mine, friends of mine, soldiers in our unit, that, hey, we've got one shot and this could end at any time. And, I think one of the true realizations in life that liberates you from fear or limiting beliefs is simply this knowledge that you're going to die, right? And the clock has been ticking since you were born, and you've got to do something with it. And
Elon's working on something so we don't die. Fine. Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, all those.
Not SpaceX. It's called HumanX. Yeah, we all kind of like live forever.
Well, I'm sure Silicon Valley has got an idea on that, but until we see otherwise, no one has beat death yet. And I think we're living through times where that's becoming. We're just being reminded of that reality, which is as smart as we think we are. We're still, I think, at our knees when nature or the universe or whatever you want to call it decides that. Things have gotten a bit out of whack or kilter or something. So
there's a reset. Yeah.
Yeah. I really had a powerful moment in 2018 at that retreat with Benoit, just thinking through and listening to people who knew me well that it's time to go big. And I got some inspired ideas from that moment about, the software and we decided to go all in on it, all in one, all in.
One of the things I was going to say that's kind of it was a testament to you actually, which was interesting about seeing somebody observe and talk about you that we both know, was your kind of, and I suppose it links to kind of your mission, what you're doing now, and I know you're going to speak a little bit more about it in hopefully a second. But there's the phrase about being a leader, and then basically the phrase was Sam is prepared to go through walls. It's like you prepare to what that's to literally disrupt walls, to go through walls to achieve your outcome, and obviously not in a destructive way, but basically just the kind of the relentless and the driven nature of what you do. Obviously, you need to make sure you take people with you along, as you just demolish those walls. Otherwise, that's a lonely place to be. But I thought that was quite an interesting kind of visualization it created in my mind about how they described your attitude to getting things done in a positive way.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a fine line, I think, between illusions of grandeur or delusions of grandeur and actual visionaries. And I think every person who changed the world or tries to change the world is told by most of the people, if not almost everyone, that they're crazy. So you always do have to check in and figure out where these impulses and ambitions are coming from. And usually they come from some very interesting places. But, if I look back at my life and what I'm passionate about, and I've always been passionate about is, I've had some fantastic teachers in my life, starting with my parents. My dad was a history teacher. My mom was a teacher her whole life. And I've had countless teachers in all ages of my life who've helped me grow, from my mentor, General McMaster in the Army, to my music teachers in school and history teachers and all kinds of things. And, I even did an entire season on my podcast with my mentors. I call it the Mentor Series. And I just believe, as a historian looking at the world, that it wasn't until about 200 years ago that we all were still working at our house, waking up, walking outside, and working in our backyard on a farm. And then the industrial age hit, and offices were invented. Offices were invented.
It's gone full circle, basically.
Yeah, look, we're going full circle. In the pandemic, we're all waking up in our underwear now and sitting around on Zoom and
speak for yourself. You don't sleep naked. Come on.
Yeah, and well, we're all hopefully putting something on when we wake up and
dancing around the fire naked.
And we are doing in a very modern way or digital way what our ancestors used to do, which is farming. We are farming. And digital real estate, as I call it, your business online is simply real estate, and it's a space in the ether of the knowledge ecosystem, right? And we all have something. I believe almost everyone has something to contribute, whether it's just to their family or a close circle of friends, or a larger audience, depending on the impact of their message. And with the level of robotics and artificial intelligence that's coming down the tracks, which we are going to get slammed by in the next 20, 30 years, 60, 70% of the jobs we're doing right now are going to become obsolete. And nobody knows what's going to replace those jobs. And I think a lot of that's going to be replaced by individual creative work that people launch themselves online as solopreneurs, freelancers, operators, and we are passionate about helping solve that problem. The technology that prevents so many people from, putting their shingle out there, as it were, or putting their little digital plot of land out there.
Their superpowers. Yeah. Okay, yes, it's their digital farm. Yeah.
Well, look, software. The reason why everyone invests in software is they're just real estate. They're digital slumlords. I mean, Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg has a plantation bigger than probably anyone in history since, the beginning of time. It's a digital plantation we're all working on, and none of us get paid any money for it. And Facebook makes a lot of money, and, we pay with our time. And that's an interesting thought to absorb, but that's really the truth. And the same thing with Google and YouTube and Amazon and these big ecosystems is they have put up massive digital pieces of real estate where there's taxes in terms of money they extract from the people who pay to put things in front of us, or we pay subscriptions for certain services, and it's leveraged. And that's why all the wealthiest people in the world are in software. They're digital real estate developers. And because they're so successful and automating everything and can do so much with so little, there's a lot less left for us to do in the big companies that used to sustain and feed everyone. So there's got to be something that's going to take that place.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, so just picking up on one of your comments. Well, you were just about to say a little word. You said a word, and then I kind of jumped in and made one of my little quips. So you talked about insanity. Yeah. And I know one of your projects is kind of links to the moving from insanity to something else. I mean, do you want to explain about one of them? I mean, I know it takes a lot of your time, but it'd be useful to people to explain to people what that is, because I think it's very. You are, in my assessment, a leader, and you have the potential to impact a lot of people's lives in the world with the work you're working on, and that's why. That's why I enjoy collaborating with you, because you always surprise me about what's going on, but also it's very, very exciting and rewarding what you're working on. So I don't know if you could explain that for a second.
Yeah, Sanitydesk is 6 years ago, we started building our own content management system to help build our own pages because we weren't satisfied with website building technology out there. And we developed quiz technology and payment technology and personalization and a lot of things in this platform that we found to be missing. And eventually we got tired of paying for a bunch of different pieces of software like Calendly, Schedule Once, and Active Campaign and marketing automation tools like MailChimp or ticketing systems like Zendesk. So we just decided to build it all in one place. And I called it Sanitydesk because I was just going crazy as a small business owner, small service business owner, with the amount of money we were paying for software and the amount of time we were spending and paying people to do that time to integrate it all through Zapier and track everything, which was impossible because different software systems are not built to work together because they're built differently by different people with different visions. And we just thought it was crazy that everything was so fragmented. And for a solopreneur who, like you, has a message to get out there, you don't want to spend a lot of time working on your tech. You want to spend a lot of time working on your art, your unique gift to the world, which is your ideas, and connecting with the people you're born to help and impacting them with as little friction as possible, and for a price you can afford and time you can afford. And that's what we found to be lacking. And we realized by speaking to and working with, over almost 100,000 people who've been through our storytelling training online, that was the issue. And we decided to really try and solve that issue. That's our tech startup, Sanitydesk. We created an all-in-one platform for solopreneurs to build, launch, and grow their business online with something you have a chance of learning, and it's affordable and integrated. And if you think back to Microsoft in the 80s, there was WordPerfect, there was Quattro, there was Key. There were all kinds of different cool programs out there, and Microsoft's genius was integrating it all in one place that just worked. And we believe the time is ripe for something similar in the small business operating system area, which is your website all the way through to your back office, your sales CRM, your marketing automation, your task management tool, and having it all integrated in one place is, we think, the future, and we're betting on it. I think
I'll always say my guidance would be is maybe think about the Satya Nadella version of Microsoft rather than the previous versions.
For the old people like you and I, Andrew, we remember the pain of starting a computer and having to remember DOS commands versus the ease of Windows and everything being in one place. But yeah, I think
C:// yeah, exactly.
The young generation doesn't understand that pain, but that is what caused personal computing to take off, is that unified system. And there's a lot of research and development by a bunch of small companies to create the tools that people needed to solve their problems, but there was no integration, and that's what Microsoft did in the 80s.
No, I was just going to say there's a great quote in Ismail Amla's book. It's released recent guest on the show, and He says from evil empire to cool kid. That's how he describes Microsoft.
Yeah, they've
it's the kind of the rejuvenation of one of the tech titans, you could say.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft got so big that they had some antitrust legislation in the late 90s, early 2000s, and but yeah, they had to adjust into a cloud-based world, and are fighting back against some of the other big ones out there. You know, Google, Facebook, and Amazon, and Salesforce, and it's interesting to watch.
Just a quick question. So, I mean, I know thank you so much for sharing your kind of experience and journey. I suppose one of the things we talked about is what we call peaks and valleys. So obviously, you know, people usually lean more towards their peaks, you know, the things that they planned and they had, you know, like a really good, you know, or the outcome surprised them in a positive way, and you know they overachieved what they did. In terms of peaks and valleys, is there some valleys you could share as well in that journey you've been on? That would be.
Oh yeah. Well.
Oh, is that a whole new episode?
No, look. I think it's important for people to be upfront about their challenges while they're happening, and to create a positive story around those challenges. And I remember, one of the darkest periods of my life was when my business didn't work in 2015 and early 16. I woke up owing a lot of money in Poland, where I decided to go back to even after my business didn't work, and going hiking in the mountains and just thinking through what was next in my life. I was mid-30s and had negative net worth at the time, and was just trying to figure out what was next. And I made it a point during that period to go on to a podcast called Project Kazimierz, which I can give you the link to, where we recorded an episode after I had gone out of business, before I'd restarted, and my co-host who had started the podcast with me, I wanted to make it a point to say at the time what it was like, rather than looking back, on stage after I'd come back from it and reminisce. Yeah, I thought it was important
in the moment, kind of thing.
Yeah, I thought it was important to document it and to say what I was going to do and how I felt. And I think one of the things that's been so powerful for me as a historian and as a storyteller is understanding the power of a narrative. And if you study the hero's journey and great stories, no one would watch a movie if everything was great the whole time. They like that tension. They like that, drama. And your life is the same way. You don't go to the gym and reach muscle failure you go to the gym and reach muscle failure for a reason, because it breaks your muscles down and it teaches you to grow. And I think one of the hardest things to learn during these peaks, these valleys, is how to tell a positive story while it's happening. And I've had a number of them since then, like, almost running out of money again when I moved from Poland to Kiev, moving here, transitioning from my Polish team to a Kiev team, and, saying goodbye to one team and building a new one. And then, telling my Kiev team a year later, if I didn't come back from the US with some investment, we'd probably have to cut back, and then getting through that and telling them the story while I'm going through it, what's going on, so that they stay with me. And and then the pandemic, when that happened, angel investment just froze over like the moon or like a glacier, and fighting through that and organizing the team to keep going, and then finding the investor and a new investor, and telling the story that he needed to hear and the team needed to hear to get through it. So I think there's entrepreneurs go through a lot of these valleys, and there's a lot of what I call dark nights of the soul, where you just wake up sometimes worried about pay or investment or whether your product's going to work or whether you're crazy or not, or if, one of the big tech companies is going to come, kidnap you or whatever, just the forces you're up against in this journey are quite interesting. And I think we all have them. And the big thing to think about as it's going on is, and to have a mentor or a guide or a Yoda, someone you can go to is how to recognize what's going on at a meta level, and tell the story you need to tell yourself to get through it. And I think that's the hardest thing to do as an individual, and especially as a leader, because you have to tell a story to yourself first and then tell it to your team. And sometimes you don't believe it, but you got to act like you believe it so your team believes it, and make it come true. So there's
I suppose it kind of raises the question: is it more of a lot? So what you're doing now, is it more of a kind of Star Wars trilogy, or is it more kind of like Lord of the Rings? Do you feel more like Luke Skywalker or Frodo?
I'm a big Star Wars fan, and I did watch Lord of the Rings too. But I was a big fan of actually Han Solo. He was my favorite in the series. And I think about
actually get looking at Princess Leia. Is that what you think?
Well, Han Solo was just, for me, was a little bit irreverent. Didn't take kindly to rules, and he always had a great sense of humor in the darkest moments. So I think I dare ask you who Chewbacca is in your life then. Oh man, I would. Have to
answer that. We have to edit that a bit out.
Oh man, I've got some great wingmen here in this journey. But I'd have to say that
you'd have to wear furry suits.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's been a good ride, and I think ultimately you have to tell yourself that whatever happens, it's going to be okay. And I always think back to the Army and in business, no one's ever shooting at you, and people don't usually die in business, at least from the business, maybe from health issues or something else. So it could always be worse, and there's some fantastic moments in business that the creativity and the camaraderie of the team and all that just make it special and hard to trade for anything else. So I think
so when I tell you, I've got a bone to pick with you anyway. You can't send me pictures of all you guys being in Kiev together and then me not being there. What's going on with that? That's like,
oh yeah, we heard there's this UK.
That's like torturing me. That is when it's lockdown.
Well, it's February of 2021, and there's this thing called the coronavirus, and your government, my old government, sort of still government, the UK, doesn't seem to like allowing travel. But there's this thing that's called the UK variant, I guess. But if someone's listening to this in 10 or 15 years, they'll wonder what the heck we're talking about. But it's been an interesting year and a half, let's say, since this all broke out.
Mm. So I mean, in terms of, I know you kind of gone through what you're working on, etc., and some really interesting insights around what you've learned. I suppose what are you most grateful for as you sit there today in Kiev with what you're working on? What makes you reflect on that?
Well, I think for me, it's definitely, ultimately, I've had a great privilege of working with people who've started out as clients and become friends, and even I've become clients of theirs, mentors and things like that. I mean, I actually came in touch with you, Andrew, through my storytelling training, which I think you paid a little bit of money for, and we became let's call it friends and associates, and you're advising my company and helping me. And so I think I'm most grateful for just the opportunity to work with an audience of people across the globe that I feel is incredibly underserved, not well served by the current tech environment. I think they've been left behind by big tech because people, for whatever reason, who are small business owners are not looked upon generally by big tech as that lucrative or interesting of a group to serve. But the reality is it's just not going well for them online compared to the way it could be and should be. And so I think just...
They don't have any buttons taking money out of your bank account. So that, when you look at it, it's like Amazon, Google, Apple.
Oh, yeah.
Facebook, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple. And it's like...
Oh, yeah. Well, just the opportunity to serve and interact with people from across the world who are, I can't think of a lot of big companies that, I think have a clean or noble purpose. A lot of them are selling unhealthy food to us, but they're the biggest companies in the world, or polluting the environment, or have horrible labor conditions for the products that we may love. So I can't think of a lot of big companies that haven't been somewhat corrupted by the size and scale of what big companies try and need to do. Maybe Tesla is one of the ones that I would say is an outlier there, but almost every small business owner I meet really is passionate about helping people, sometimes to their own detriment, meaning they don't charge enough, or they haven't figured out how to ask for the value they provide to the world in return. And just trying to help those people have a fair shake and give them the technology they deserve and the help they deserve has been a privilege. And, to get paid to do that, and work with a team, an international team, a great team of people. It's a real privilege to lead two companies, my media company, my tech company, and to be able to lead them to helping a group of people that I love working with that doesn't feel like work is an extraordinary privilege, to something to be thankful for. And then, to end up paying some of them and partnering with some of them is just icing on the cake. Some of these people that come through my marketing and end up interacting with.
That's great. No, I agree. It's you do feel like you're creating a new highway, which is it's inspirational to do it and makes you you feel like you're actually making a difference and really helping them and an impact. So it's very good. So I thank you for that, Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Andrew.
So I suppose in terms of just wrapping up today's episode, one of the things I usually ask is, because obviously we have people that are founders, co-founders, entrepreneurs listen to this podcast and all across the world, and usually what we say is about that kind of through your journey, what have you learned? What would be the kind of takeaways or the kind of pearls of wisdom from the desk of from the same desk, the Sanitydesk of Mr. Sam Cook? What would you share in that area?
I think couple things that I've learned recently is if, as an entrepreneur, the three biggest things I would say you need to learn is number one, discover your own leadership style that is authentic to you, and don't try and be someone you're not. Everyone else is taken. Be yourself. And I think when you connect with who you are and be yourself, we all have it inside of ourselves to lead others. And leadership is really the art of the impossible. And most businesses at the beginning are an impossible dream that become possible through a leader who makes it so. And I think you don't have to be a great manager to be a great leader, but you do need to have the judgment to find good managers and empower them. So the second, I think, key to success is finding people who are not like you, who can compensate for your weaknesses, and so you can focus on your strengths, and then delegating to them. I think ultimately delegation is one of the hardest things to learn as a leader. And it's probably the most important thing because, yes, people may not do it as well as you do, or they may not care as much as you do, but ultimately you only have so much time and energy to devote to your project. And you got to find out where to spend that time so that you can 10, 100x your impact. And then, finally, just trust. Delegation takes trust, and you have to, I think one of the great things to do is always assume the best in people before you assume the worst. And even if people disappoint you, a lot of times they don't mean to, or even if they do, it doesn't mean that they're not necessarily a bad person. Maybe they just got caught in a bad position. But I think if you can do those three things, learn how to be yourself so that you can lead people, because people will follow you if you're being yourself. Find people who are not like you and delegate to them. And then finally, how to trust those people. They'll rise to the occasion, and people will rise to the occasion when you trust them, and they'll leave if they're good people if you don't trust them, because people want to take ownership and be trusted and be in a positive relationship.
Yeah, that's great. Some really good pearls. Thank you. So, in terms of, if anybody's listening to this episode and they want to know more about what's going on in Mr. Cook's world and what you're doing to move the dial, what's the best way of getting hold of you? Are you on the internet? Maybe you may be on the internet. I don't know if you are.
Yeah, we are. There's Sanitydesk.com is a great place to go. You can take one of our tests on there, our Apple audit. You can take a test about your technology and figure out where you stand and how we can help you. We also have the Storytelling and Digital Age Masterclass, which is a very well, that's how I met you, Andrew. A lot of people have gone through that, and that's a great introduction of what we do, both from a storytelling and training standpoint, and also helping you understand how to translate that story to your tech online. So we've done many of those things, and are looking forward to continue to put out some great content on our blog. So you can Google Storytelling and Digital Age Masterclass. You can go to Sanitydesk.com, and I'm sure you'll find me out there in the Google.
Maybe create a new search engine. Yes.
We'll get there. I'm sure it's a small thing. Yeah.
Never say never. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. So thank you very much, Mr. Samuel Cook.
Thank you, Andrew. Pleasure to be on the G&T Sessions podcast. And to your audience, if there is crazy and quirky and techie as you, I'm sure it's a pleasure to meet all of them. And
crazy and quirky is me, really. But you just before we finish this episode, the thing is that your handle. What was your handle when you were in the US Army? You're going to tell the audience before we close.
Oh, Crazy Six. I was literally called Crazy Horse Six. My call sign, my troop was Crazy Horse Troop, and most people left off the horse and just called me Crazy Six. So Sanitydesk is apropos, I guess.
Exactly. I've known you a few years, and that's when I heard that, I was like, bullseye. So there you go. Anyway. Yeah. Thank you very much, Sam. Pleasure to have you on the show, and catch you soon. And that was Andrew Turner, founder and host of the G&T Sessions podcast. Have a lovely day.